Hey, welcome back to the channel. Thursday afternoon, where we always talk college football and USC football. A few things going on with USC with Kyle McDonald getting hired by Jim Harbaugh and the LA Chargers. We'll get into that another time, but really pleased to have a guest join me today, Tony Altimore, co-host on the Voice of College Football USC channel. And we had Tony on a couple weeks ago to talk about a lot of developments that are happening in college football this offseason. It's even crazier than last year when we had conference realignment. Some of those things are coming to fruition. And as many of you college football fans know, these past 2 days, there's been a lot of developments with the college football 12-team playoff. The management committee met on Tuesday. The board of managers met on Tuesday. Those are the school presidents. And then the management committee, those are the commissioners, met yesterday. So, Tony, thanks a lot for joining us on the channel and helping us walk through what has exactly happened and how this possibly can change college football moving forward.
Oh, thanks. It's good to be here.
Great to have you, Tony.
So a lot of things have happened this week. They're really interesting. The first one is the playoff has changed. Now, there's a couple elements of the playoff. The first one is what happens for the next 2 years. That it currently has a contract with ESPN. Then there's what happens beyond that. Now, ESPN has submitted a bid to them that will sort of like end the current contract and turn it into a new 8-year deal. It extends the contract, expands it. We won't get into the contract details, but ESPN has offered to take over the next 8 years of the college football playoff, but the playoff committee has not come to a full agreement on that because they have a lot of decisions to make about how the money's going to get handed out, about who's going to get what, how many teams are going to get qualifications. Do they want to go beyond 12? Do they want to have it at 14 or 16? So there's a lot of things going on right now. They're really interesting debates. But we got some alignment on what they're going to do for at least the next 2 years. And for those of you guys on the West Coast, what's one of the interesting things is what do they do about the Pac-2? And the automatic qualifying berths and everything like that. So what they've agreed to do for the next 2 years is to pay the 2 Pac-2 schools as if they were in a power conference still. So they're still going to get the same money that they would. They don't get all the Pac-12 money. They just get their own 2 schools worth. And then they agree to give SMU an escalating share moving up. But they've apparently made it quite clear to conferences that they are not here to subsidize mass growth and G5 upgrades to a power conference level. Now, the next big change that they did is they've switched from saying the top 6 conference champions get an automatic bid to now saying only the top 5.
Right.
And they've put an 18 minimum in so that the Pac-2 is not considered its own conference.
So that's what was agreed to by the board of managers on Tuesday, that being the university presidents, including Kirk Schultz from Washington State. And then yesterday it was approved by the management committee. Those are the commissioners and Jack Swarbrick of Notre Dame. So that's essentially they're going from the 6+6 model, which they originally agreed to the 5+7. Now, Tony, let's go ahead and back up a little bit because you mentioned ESPN.
Well, yesterday got really crazy too.
Okay, go ahead and how did it get crazy?
Yesterday they had apparently a 9-hour meeting where they laid out all their different thoughts on the future. Because remember, they have this offer for the next 8 years, so they need to decide what they want to do. And apparently the Big Ten and the SEC started saying things like, well, maybe we should go bigger, and maybe we should each have, of the 12, maybe we should each have 4 automatic qualifiers, or maybe we'll get bigger. Maybe we'll take 4 and, you can have 1 or 2 to the ACC and the Big 12. So they've also started to talk about they need a tiered revenue system. So right now there's the power conferences get a certain amount per school, and the G5 get a small amount per school. Now they're saying maybe this should be tiered. Maybe the SEC and the Big Ten should get more per school, and the next ones get less per school. And sort of the shadow hovering over all this is that if they don't agree to it, the college football playoff is not an institution thing. It's just sort of a joint club that they've all gotten together and joined. They could walk away from it and be like, you know what? Okay, we're done with all you. We want a new thing. The other big talk is the Big Ten and the SEC have said they want unequal voting. They don't like that they have the same voting power as the Sun Belt and the MAC. So Greg Sankey thinks he should have more vote power in the college football playoff than the Sun Belt or the MAC, or than Kirk Schultz from Washington State. I think there's a real interesting debate Schultz got them to keep, for 2 years, they get to keep their $5 million a year or whatever, $6 million a year. So, okay, good for you, Kirk. You may have just lost your, permanent relevance. So we'll have to see.
This is all very interesting because ESPN, back on February 14th of this month, they agreed to a 6-year, $7.8 billion deal, $1.3 billion a year to broadcast college football playoff through the 2031-32 season. But this is, now we're trying to find out, okay, well, this is that extension you're talking about, Tony, 8 years, right? This would include the 2024, 2025 coming up. But really, how can you be bidding on something or agree to something when now, 2 weeks later, the college football playoff format could be changing? And let's rewind a little bit here.
Well, this is a really interesting debate, and it's kind of why I think that Kirk Schultz may have been very foolish. There, I think, was an opportunity to sign this deal a while ago. I think extending it by a couple months may have been foolish because you may be losing power.
Oh, absolutely.
You should have signed it a while ago and gotten it done. That's the thing, is I think they need to get it done. There are people, from Big Ten SEC circles that have told me that they really appreciate that, Schultz held off the new deal because it gave them time. Now they've created their new working groups. They're talking about things together. Their power and ego is swelling, and they're saying, okay, well, thanks for delaying it, Kirk. Now that you've delayed it, we've really sort of seen we don't want you to be able to do that, and we don't think you need that kind of power, that kind of money.
Always surprises with college football, especially when you have the SEC involved. Don't think about this as college football. Think of this as a business. Okay, this is a business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it makes a lot of money for the TV networks. They have grown in power over the last several decades. Let's just remember, flashing back, as much as college football has changed, it seems like a decade ago that in June of 2021, this 12-team playoff was created. It was the idea of 4 guys huddling in a room. And those 4 guys were Bob Bowlesby, who was the commissioner of the Big 12, Craig Thompson, commissioner of the Mountain West, Jack Swarbrick, the Notre Dame AD, who is going to be resigning shortly here, or has resigned. He'll be officially stepping down.
Retiring.
And Greg Sankey of the SEC. Which one of these is still in power?
Well, Swarbrick is technically still there.
He is still there. But Notre Dame's always the queen on the chessboard, so to speak. They kind of move in all directions at their own pace. But this was agreed to back in June of 2021. And if you remember, about a month later, OU and Texas went ahead and behind Bob Bowlesby's back agreed to go to the SEC. So this is what started everything off. And now we get to this college football playoff 12-team model, which is going to go into effect next year. And like you mentioned, Tony, now there's rumors about 14, 16 teams that were brought up in yesterday's meeting. Talk a little bit about what do you think the motivation is about, floating that trial balloon.
Well, first of all, there's a couple things that people have looked at that they've talked about the numbers, which is, I guess, a couple games in recent years have been very alarming to the TV networks and to the rest of the playoff community. And they are the G5 games, quite honestly. The Cincinnati playoff game did horribly. The USC Tulane game in the Cotton Bowl did terribly. That Oregon Liberty game was awful. And so there's a lot of people are saying, like, okay, we're gonna have like this one G5. Like, do people want to watch Liberty versus Georgia? No. So like the number that came back on the ESPN bid is significantly lower than a lot of people expected. A lot of people thought this was going to be a much more lucrative ESPN contract. Now, first of all, this is an ESPN contract. They're still in the exclusive negotiating period for ESPN. So this was not bid out. Now, ESPN, I guess, could sublicense some games, but this was not put out to public bid. So you can argue about whether it, was or wasn't. I think with the Big Ten's influence, and Big 12 has some deals with Fox too. If Fox really wants in on this, then they will bid. But Fox is already spending a lot of money on college football. So who knows? We'll see what's up with that. But the real interesting thing, sort of here for the structure, is do they want more? Do they want more teams? And I think people would rather have more, Penn State, Utah, Ole Miss, and less like pat you on the back, Cincinnati's and Liberties.
Yeah. So what do you think happens between now? Because they have to get a deal done. We're taking
no, they don't.
Well, in terms of
they have 2 years.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yes, because it's set up for 12 teams in 2024 and 2025. So what do you think the motivation is? I guess there's so many layers to this onion.
So many layers.
Because ESPN wants full control for obvious reasons. But they're also a partner of the college football playoff. There has to be some type of money agreement. Do you think that's why they are looking at, okay, well, maybe we go to 14 games and the top 2 teams have a bye instead of 4. So maybe we get, better matchups in those 6 games that would be, or not, I'm sorry, in those games featuring 6 teams, right?
Yeah.
Versus the games featuring 4 teams, 8, the first round being 8 teams versus 12.
Well, that and getting rid of the buys.
Yeah, getting rid of the buys.
And there's some question about, well, would they, if they do expand this more, would you want to get rid of conference championship games? Because what good does conference championship game do if the top 5 teams from the conference are going to the playoff?
Right, and that gives Notre Dame an advantage. Should they be highly ranked and on the verge of qualifying for the conference playoff?
It gives one of your teams another loss
for the college football playoff, because on that championship weekend, Notre Dame gets a bye. Right?
Yeah,
they get a bye, and you might have an Alabama go against Georgia. You might have an Ohio State going against USC or Oregon, and they get a bye, but Notre Dame has one less chance to lose. And they get a bye that first weekend, which is unfair to the other teams. But there's, I guess, so many layers to this. What do you think is going to happen? If your best guess, and nobody really knows, but what do you see happening for beyond? So in 2026 moving forward?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, the Big Ten and the SEC have taken it upon themselves to solve some of the broader issues. And I hope they can do it. They need to solve revenue sharing with athletes. They need to solve employment status. They need to solve the outstanding lawsuits, the antitrust. They need to get all that done. And I think they've told the NCAA, you are not being serious people, and it's time for serious people to solve serious problems. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was all linked together. At the same time, they're working with TV advisors. I don't know. I think they're working with CAA is advising the college football playoff. So like,
Yes.
if CAA is telling them this is the deal you need to take, then maybe they will just take that deal. But I think you'll see more stratification in terms of power, where you'll see, and people get mad at me when I say this, but like, remember, guys, we've had stratifications. We had that when we created this, and we took those 5 conferences and put them above others. We did that for a reason. So, are we going to have the 2 that are sort of more above the others? Probably. For the fans that don't like that, I would argue what you should do is your team should win. If your team isn't winning, then, hush. Unpopular opinion. Sorry, that's not going to win me many friends.
Hey, appreciate you being on today, Tony. If you like college football, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate your support. That'll help us with the algorithm. And thank you to all the new subscribers to the channel. And really appreciate you hanging out today. Tony's always a great person to talk college football with, always on top of what's happening from a university leadership conference perspective. It's always great to get your insight. Obviously it's about money, and we're talking about college football here, and you give the SEC and the Big Ten more time, or give any businesses more time, and they're going to be able to strategize. So it's not a coincidence that a couple weeks ago they formed this advisory committee. It was mentioned, I think, today by Nick Saban, who is no longer coaching Alabama, who's going to be working for ESPN. He's basically saying this new college football, the student athletes are no longer. It's no longer a student athlete. So could his words be echoing what we all kind of know, and also kind of in the future diminishes the role of the NCAA? And could we be seeing a breakaway from the NCAA?
So I don't think so, but it's in their back pocket. And I'll tell you why. The reason is the NCAA does a lot of stuff, and it's stuff that someone has to do. And it is a tremendous amount of people, again, things to do. Now, you can be mad at them that they don't do it well, but like, somebody has to do all that stuff if you want to break away. And it's not like 2 guys in an office somewhere. You're going to need hundreds of people and IT systems developed. I mean, like, huge IT endeavors. You're going to need entire human capital infrastructure of people and like HR strategic planning to plan the workforce, to then hire the workforce, which, by the way, the people that do this stuff work for the NCAA. So you're just going to hire their people, probably. Like, I mean, so the setting up of a new organization, and I have a lot of experiences because I work with companies when they're doing divestitures and M&A and stuff like that. So I know what a company can do at company speed. Higher ed does not work at company speed. And even at company speed, that would be really slow. And also, by the way, you can't even start that until you have governance in place, strategy in place, financial backing up, all that kind of stuff. So that would take a year. I mean, look at how long it takes them guys to argue about whether or not there should be 12 teams in the playoff or 8, let alone like, let's plan the entire structure of a new NCAA. It would be like almost, it's not impossible, right? You get the right people from McKinsey and EY and Deloitte, and they all come in and help you plan. But the workload and the cost would be enormous. So I don't think it's a breakaway so much as I think it's a stratification within the existing structure. And an example of that is a number of years, 10 years ago, whatever it was, when they created the A5, the Autonomous 5. They gave the 5, we call them Power Conference. Technical term is A5 for Autonomous 5. They gave those 5 conferences the powers to change rules and do things. So, for example, like if one of the things that they have the power, which I don't quite understand why none of them have done it. They can just for their conference's games and their home games, just start doing things like putting the speakers in the quarterbacks' helmets. They can do that. It's up to them, and they have autonomous powers that are important. What I think you'll see more of those autonomous powers. You'll see them solving more of their own issues and less power probably to things like the NCAA, like the Division I Council, which runs the Division I. Now that's like the big commissioners. It's a bunch of ADs, some presidents, stuff like that. They're sort of saying like, hey, I don't think that the Summit League should have the same power that the SEC does. At the same time, remember that like the commissioner of the Summit League might have been the deputy commissioner of the SEC, and I forget where he worked before, but like, these are smart. There are smart people from all of those groups. But as far as interests go, I think you'll see a consolidation of the power and them having more autonomy within the existing organization. Just again, it would be so insurmountable. It's doable, but like almost impossible to do, certainly in any short amount of time. Look what it takes to set up a new conference. That's really hard, and that's not very much. There's not a whole lot of work to do compared to that. So I can't imagine, again, those of you guys that have worked in like big organizations, just think about like what it would take to set up the IT structure and all of the IT development that would have to go on to run the organization, and it would just be ridiculous, let alone the people. And again, who are you going to hire? Well, you're going to hire probably people that used to work for the NCAA anyway.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned earlier,
or else, by the way, real quick, this is sort of what happened, by the way, which you don't want. What happened in Eastern Europe for the first, I don't know, from like, the early 90s to like the mid 2000s, like the mid aughts, was that when they got rid of the communists, they elected all the reformers and they were all happy. Except it turns out those people didn't know anything about running a government. And so like they kind of sucked. So they got rid of them. So then they were like, oh, let's bring in the Social Democrats, who were just the old communists. And then they were like, oh, crap, these were the communists again. And then they elected the new people who still didn't know anything about running it. So there was this wild swing as the Eastern European countries sort of grew up a little bit. And that's the kind of thing like I don't think they want. Like they don't want to just hire a whole bunch of people who don't know what they're doing, but they also don't want to hire like, oh, let's just move the NCAA and give it a new name. So, but what I think the point of a breakaway though is that the option is there. And so the option is, you tell people like Kirk Schultz, like, hey, stop messing around with this, or we're just going to pick up our ball and go home, because we can, but we don't want to.
Well said. So getting back to the idea that was floated in this 9-hour meeting yesterday, it's presumed that the SEC and Big Ten had the opportunity to flex and foreshadow
which I think they did.
Yeah, what could be happening in the future. And we're moving into this new era of the playoff system, 12, 14, whatever it may be. And there comes qualifiers. And I think the idea is the bigger conferences such as the SEC and Big Ten, they're eyeing at getting 4 teams in every year. That's the goal. I would presume that's going to be the goal. Or more. And
if it gets bigger.
And I think they're justified, because if you take a look at the college football, let's call it the BCS to the college football playoff era, there's roughly 26 years from 1998 through last year. And of those 26 years, I believe there was 27 champions or 27 champions, because there was the split in 2003. Regardless, the Big Ten, as it's going to be configured next year, and the SEC as it's going to be configured, have won 17 of those. The ACC and Notre Dame have won the other ones. The Big 12, as it will be currently configured, 0. So there is a definite 80-20 rule. And so with that, and you hear about all these other teams that are moving to the different conferences because it's about money. Look at Florida State's doing. They're trying to leave the ACC because of money and revenue sharing. It's no wonder that the SEC and the Big Ten at this point, when there's a jumping off, they're going to demand more money. I think you talked about that, Tony, with these tiers in terms of distribution, and I think that's part of it. So where do you see this going, and what do you think the Big 12 and the ACC and Notre Dame, do they have a leg to stand on? If
Well, there's people that think Notre Dame could join the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. There's a lot of yapping about it. I don't know. It would make a lot of sense. So I think they need some. I think the ACC needs some stability. The Big 12, their PR people are working their butts off, really, really hard right now to try to hype every bad narrative they can about the ACC because they sort of want to be like, remember Tyco, that huge conglomerate that failed?
yes,
Like ITT, the huge conglomerate that failed. Like the Big 12 has learned nothing from them, and they're like, who can we add? Let's add. Like, and every time that people realize their football's bad, it's almost like, like the old Ricky Nelson song, like they just want to hear the favorites. Every time people realize their football's bad, all they do is they're like, we should expand. It's like, play the old hits. The crowd will cheer. And so they really want the ACC to have problems. They're hoping there'll be some scraps for them to pick up. I can't get some of the math to work, and I could be wrong, right? But like, let's work through the math on this. Now we know that Notre Dame and Florida State are worth a lot of money, so we're not talking about Notre Dame and Florida State, but anybody else in the ACC, right? Like Carolina, Virginia, people talk a lot about that. Their TV numbers, all of their metrics are right on par with Cal and Stanford, right? They're just like Cal and Stanford, almost identical to Cal and Stanford, TV data wise. Now, Cal and Stanford, we know, were not even worth a fraction of a Big Ten membership.
that's right.
The networks didn't want them for free, basically.
Because
Again,
Cal's going to cause issues, right? They're going to.
Let's just. I mean, we have our own like Cal laughs, but like, let's just remember, Cal and Stanford have the same data metrics as far as attractiveness. Actually, their market's better, but they have the same data metrics as far as attractiveness as Carolina and Virginia. And so you assume most people are worse. Now, the ACC gets more money than the Big 12 because, again, also no one wants to watch Central Florida or Cincinnati or Brigham Young or whatever. So the ACC teams would need like a full share for this to be, although they're going to buy their way out. So for them to have to buy their way out, that means they have to get a full share. Now, what were Washington and Oregon worth? Half share to the Big Ten.
Yep.
So are you trying to tell me that Carolina and Virginia or insert whoever else, and I love the ACC schools. I do. I'm like a huge proponent of the ACC. But you're telling me that they're worth double Oregon? They are not. So I don't see the math where the SEC want, the SEC is going to take these teams, the Big Ten is going to take these teams. I mean, now ESPN could do something crazy. They could terminate the ACC contract or whatever. If they did, who knows? Anything's game. They've so far indicated they don't want to do that, but I can't get the math to work that all these teams are worth double Oregon. And you guys know I love to tease Oregon, but like, I got news for you. North Carolina State, UVA, they are not worth double Oregon. They're worth the same as Cal.
That's a great point, Tony. And it's basically a form of leverage. Okay. It's like, I constantly get texts and emails because right now there's a lack of inventory for homes in my neighborhood. And so, there's a young couple that would like to buy a house such as yours in your location, yada, yada, yada. It's like, look, I'm not looking to move. I'll text them back. I'm not looking to move. And why don't you give me your best one-time over market offer? Because you're trying to get in to buy my house and make my life inconvenienced. Now, if it's the right money, everybody's got a price.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're not gonna give you a price. They're gonna they're going to want market or slightly market. Whenever you have that, whenever you get that email, like, oh, we don't have to work with an agent type of thing. It's not on the market. Yeah, no. So kind of what you're saying, like Florida State, are they worth more than a half price?
Yeah, Florida State's metrics are really good.
Yeah, but are they, how, do they
They're
have
really
to,
good.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
you're the
Florida,
leverage if you're
so,
the Big Ten or the SEC, because you can basically say, we'll take you for X.
well, yeah, no, Florida State and Notre Dame are both worth a ton. Notre Dame is worth a fortune.
Sure they are.
If you can get Notre Dame to join, they're worth a fortune. If you could even get Notre Dame to do with the Big Ten what they're doing to the ACC, it would be worth a fortune. Florida State, again, the TV metrics and what the valuation people tell me. I'm not a TV valuation guy, but I listen to what they say. They say Florida State would be worth it. Florida State has phenomenal, even when they're bad, they have phenomenal TV viewership.
So here's the thing, though. If you're Notre Dame, I'm just using Notre Dame as
Miami's a maybe. I don't know.
Not coupled with Florida State. I'm just saying Notre Dame by itself. And there's a possibility they might join a conference because when Swarbrick is gone, who knows? Maybe they have a different mentality. I don't know. But if you're going to go,
worth a lot.
And they've had a long history of issues with the Big Ten on wanting to join, not wanting to join. And then you've got somebody like Greg Sankey, because those are the two places that they would go, in my opinion. I
don't think they would go to the SEC.
No,
and I don't think the SEC would want them.
I don't think so.
I mean, in theory, anybody would want them, but like the SEC has a very clear strategy of what they want.
Sure,
they want adjacent, Southeast, regional, and they want financially accretive.
Yeah, there's a lot of different layers why,
but
Notre Dame wouldn't work. But at the same time, when you're Greg Sankey, and if you were considering Notre Dame, you're not going to give Notre Dame what Notre Dame wants financially. Bottom line.
Well, and the Big Ten already has or it's reported. I mean, I don't have the Big Ten's contract. It's reported that there is a very lucrative carve out in the Big Ten's media deal for Notre Dame should they ever join. Very large carve out reported. So I mean, I can't verify that, but the people seem fairly confident in it. But again, you think about like, is Clemson accretive to the maybe? Clemson's a maybe, Miami's a maybe, but like there isn't a lot of money. And then remember, if the ACC loses a couple of teams, now the question about the ACC is, are they going to get stupid like the Pac-12 people did? Do they have people like Bobby Robbins and Phil DiStefano running around like being stupid? Because if they don't, they'll be fine. The ACC minus Florida State and maybe Clemson is still better than the Big 12.
And you have to look at the ACC commissioner. I don't think there's a lot of confidence in Jim Phillips from the ACC schools. Much like
I don't know about that. It seems like there is.
Well,
again, Big 12 PR is pumping out a whole lot of negative stuff. When you actually talk to the ACC schools, I don't get that sense.
Okay. He doesn't just my opinion, he doesn't strike me as a guy that is going to be able to. I just think he's an average commissioner.
Well, he's an AD. Remember, he was the Northwestern AD for a long time. So he speaks president and he speaks AD.
Mm-hmm.
What he is not is a Brett Yormark. Who's just out there like trying to be the old CEO of Tyco, who built as much nonsense as he could before it imploded, and cashed out what he could. So like, I mean, that's sort of like the whole like carnival barker stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and I haven't talked to him, and I haven't talked to him in forever, but like President Price from Duke, who was the provost when I was in grad school, I can tell you that like that carnival barker stuff would not work with him. So like, from what it seems, Phillips is doing what the presidents want and what the ADs want. So if they can keep the presidents and ADs from being stupid, they'll be okay. Because again, North Carolina State is pretty much like Oklahoma State. Syracuse is pretty much like West Virginia. So like, I mean, close enough. Just again, you've got some good teams and you've got some bottom dwellers. But the Big 12 is a lot of bottom dwellers. And so the people don't realize, like, if the ACC can just not be stupid, don't be like the pack, don't jump to stupidness, then I think that they would be fine, even if they lose a team or two. And quite honestly, I think they need to get rid of Florida State. Like, when you have gangrene, you have to amputate the limb. And I think that Florida State has become infected gangrene on the ACC, and they need to they need to find a price, make FSU write that very large check that they're issuing bonds to be able to pay. I mean, that Florida State's like refinancing all their debt and getting a whole new bond issue to be ready to pay for stuff. So I think you need to get that check and get them out of there and stabilize yourself. Because again, a lot of the attacks on the ACC are coming from the Big 12.
That's a viewpoint I have not heard, but it makes a lot of sense if you take a look at it from a business point of view, because that situation is not going to get better.
It's destabilizing.
But FSU that's frothing at the mouth, and you name a price, get them out of your conference, let them go, find your life raft, live a better life. And we, like you said, we'll go ahead and take a check, and we'll stabilize our conference, and we move forward.
And there's a chance maybe somebody else writes a check too. Again, we're talking about an enormous check. And again, the other thing is people are like, oh, they can go here, they can go there. But like again, the ACC gets paid pretty decently. They get paid more than the Big 12. So, and by the way, the other thing, by the way, is this is an interesting element, is if you look at academic rankings, and again, this matters to presidents, every single ACC school, all 18 of them, are higher ranked than any of the 16 Big 12 schools. Now, there's a little bit. Was Louisville out? Louisville might be an outlier. Other than Louisville, I forget where Louisville is. Louisville might still be there, but like the difference is stark. Sorry, somebody's gonna come after me in the comments. I forget exactly where Louisville is. They might be ahead of them, but certainly the others all are. So like they like their basketball conference. They like having all their championships in the state of North Carolina. Like just they like what they're doing. And so again, if they can just avoid being dumb, I think they have a fine future. Is it the SEC? No. But you know what? They don't need to be the SEC. Like the ACC there are 18 private schools in FBS. And I think what 11 in the top three. There's 2 in the Big 10, 1 in the SEC, and 8 in the Big 12. I'm sorry, 8 in the ACC. So they have a lot of private schools. They like what they're doing. They just have to get through and not be dumb. Don't be like the pack.
There you go. That's going to be the multi-million-dollar question. Hey, Tony, we're getting short on time here. Let people know you can find Tony Altimore on Twitter. What do you have going on, Tony, that you're working on?
Working on a bunch of different regular client projects as well as some stuff for a university that's kind of interesting. But always glad to chat with folks. Love to engage with folks. And I just put out a thing today, really interesting, on sort of comparing a whole bunch of, I think it was 18 different metrics of how did Notre Dame and Florida State fit into the Big Ten. So I'll tell you one thing to think about is, if those two went to the Big Ten and that made it 20, no one else is close. No one else is close to accretive like those two. So, that could actually be stabilizing, believe it or not. Again, cutting off, it's kind of like an old pirate. You got a hook for a hand, but you got to cut off the gangrene.
Well, I'll leave it with this. All this talk about conference realignment last year, and now with the 2 big conferences and a lot of uncertainty, and you add in NIL and coaches leaving to go to the NFL and transfer portal, there is so much change to college football. And a lot of people are going to have their negative opinions one way or the other. We all love our college football, but it's changing. And so if I can equate it with pizza. Tony, you love pizza?
Always.
One of my favorite pizzas is anything with spicy sausage. And so I'm always going to enjoy my pizza like I'm going to enjoy college football. I just don't want to really know how the sausage is made. And right now, we are peeking into how college football is being made, shaped, and formed moving forward. It's not very pretty, but you know what? Hey, it's the glass is either half empty or half full. We're going to get our college football. Is it going to look different? Hell yes. We don't know what it's going to end up looking like, but I know I'm going to enjoy my college football and my pizza. With that, thank you very much for tuning in. Check us out on the next episode. Tony, thank you so much.
Thank you. Fight on, everybody.